In this current elections, I don't think that BN will be denied two-third majority, but I think that the mechanism has started to educate people at least. What you want is to have an educated voting public. And if that process has started, hopefully this will bring us to the next elections, by which time we'll have more young voters because they would have registered, hopefully, by then. And 5 years from now, we'll have the chance to make a difference. Right now, I'm not so sure about that. I think both Bersih and Hindraf have been very, very impactful on the whole nation. Bersih, because it transcended race and religion, it brought people from different communities together, and it was one of the first times that people actually suddenly believed in an ideology. In a country where the political debates are always revolving around race and religion, it was a great refreshing change to actually go into principles and what people believe in free and fair elections. So that definitely has an impact on people. Whether or not it has an impact on their voting patterns, I think we need to analyze like the next layer, which unfortunately does go back into talking about race because you're talking about political parties and their constituents. Let's talk about Hindraf. Hindraf, I think, it's probably one of the first times that the Indian community has come together in defiance of government, in a sense. In the past, the Indians have always been very traditional supporters of Barisan Nasional. If you look at the way they voted, especially, or even in surveys, you look at polls, Indians would generally say that they're quite satisfied with the government, but all this is before Hindraf. When Hindraf came in, it highlighted the plight of the lower socioeconomic levels of the Indian community, which then spiraled to the urban intellectuals who realized that this is very true. So in a sense, it brought together Indians of all levels, your rock bottom poor right up to your urban wealthy, so to speak, because they agree on the same idea, the same principle. How it will affect the elections, it will definitely have an impact. If you look at some of the recent polls that have been done, they show that the ratings Indians have of government have actually plummeted really far down, when in the past, it's always been kind of like that. Chinese, it's always on the way down, but this time you can see the significant drop amongst the Indians. And I think they might even be willing to vote parties that they were not before convinced of. For example, they would be willing to vote DAP. Okay, that's traditionally also quite expected, but this time they might be even willing to vote PAS, which is very surprising. I think that Pakla missed out on a tremendous opportunity that he had 4 years ago. Where else in other parts of the world can you get such a tremendous mandate in government and parliament? With that sort of support that the people had for him, he could have done so much more. He started out with lots of promises which people actually believed in, and if he had even shown a level of sticking to some of the promises, I think he would have done a much better job. I think that over the past years, unfortunately, he has been unwilling to make very strong statements. Perhaps he didn't want to anger some members of his party, some members of the traditional political structure and framework that he inherited. Despite the fact that he has talked about wanting to have a different way of governing the country, unfortunately we look at a pretty similar way of governing compared to Dr. Mahathir, where he still talks about mega projects. He still does lots of corridors in the country, which is a way of developing the country. But then he hasn't been able to produce the same economic results that Mahathir did in the past. So during his entire tenure, we've seen a lot of problems coming up, which have been unfortunately swept under the carpet. And when you do not address these issues up front, they're going to keep on recurring time and time again. So you kind of have the issues in cycles. like religion, race, corruption over and over again, but the laws and the policies were just not addressed properly. I think if he continues where he is, it will be very much the same. If you look at the manifesto that was just launched yesterday, 2 days ago, most of the targets there are about the same as what you see in the last manifesto or in the ninth Malaysia Plan. Yeah, so it doesn't deviate very much. The opposition can do one of two things. Number one, it could act as a very strong check and balance to the government. Number two, they could aim at actually governing, whichever state or at federal level, depending on what the objective is. For the first one, the opposition needs to be able to develop sort of indicators to actually do their check and balance role. How do they monitor government, for example? Is there a system where they monitor budgets? Do they work together with civil society in a systematic, structured manner? Talking about transparency or accountability measures. So that's one thing. And then, of course, if you want to go for power, then you need to have very solid policies, very solid manifestos that can actually run counter to what the government proposes. The manifestos, of course, are very brief, so you can't see whether there's very detailed solutions. But I did take a look at the DAP's budget proposal, kind of a shadow budget to the government's budget 2008. And it does look very comprehensive. There are some detailed proposals and plans. So that's an example, perhaps, of where the opposition should be leading. To stop looking at Malaysians as if they are segregated. We keep talking about a Bangsa Malaysia. We keep talking about a Malaysia that is colorblind to race. The leaders need to live up to what they're saying in their political speeches. When they win in the elections, they cannot sort of renegade on their promises, and when they go back to their own UMNO, MCA political parties, say things which are opposing to what they said during the election period. And I think as a whole, Malaysia is ready to talk about things truthfully and honestly. We need to be ready to even talk about things like the social contract, what's in the constitution, about Islam, about NEP, affirmative action policies. And once the government is able to accept the fact that people are ready to engage, then we can all do this and do it in a rational sort of dialogue. I think to all the voters, they need to be able to make an educated vote. They need to be able to look at what the party has or has not done in the past 4 years or 50. I think they need to examine the individuals as well, the candidates. Have they done enough for the constituency? If they're new people, what are they like? Are they people of integrity? Do they stand up against corruption? So that's on the more intellectual side of things. As a whole, I think that this time they must really think about what they're doing and not just do it because they've been voting a certain way for any number of years. They need to think about what kind of future Malaysia they want for their children, for their grandchildren, and do their research. Go online, go on the internet, find out more, go to our centre's website. We've done quite a bit of research, and talk to different people. Attend charamas if they want to, but don't go into the voting booth blind or unaware of the issues that have been, attacking and hampering our country.